According to the statistics done by the General Office for Population and Family Planning, the population of Vietnam has reached 90 million in 2013. With present population scale, Vietnam has remained positioned as the third largest population in Southeast Asia and number 14 in the world. Over 62 million Vietnamese people are at the labor age, account for 69% of the national population. It's the huge human resources for the industrialization and modernization of the country, and also a wide, potential and attractive market for foreign investment. However, the globalization process is bringing a great deal of opportunities for enhancing Vietnam workforce and also challenges for managers and human resources officers, especially in talent retention, avoiding brain drain problem. In the upcoming year 2015, the ASEAN Economic Community will be at top list. Vietnam, as well as other ASEAN nation members, will have to face with complete open market, and the latest edition of our free turnover also places the human resources managing in every enterprises organization in Vietnam in a tight spot.
Hello to all the viewers who are watching Sharing Vietnam on VTC 10 Net Viet. Human resources issues are very important and urgent matters to Vietnam as well as many other countries in the world, especially when we're living in a market economy which is globally integrating. Today, in order to have a thorough insight to the issues as well as to come up with efficient solutions to managing and nurturing human resources in Vietnam, we are here to meet with a credible top specialist who has published over 80 books on the subject. He is currently working as a professor at the Pennsylvania University, United States. Hello, Professor Dr. William J. Rothwell. Thank you for joining us today in Sharing Vietnam.
Thank you.
On the last 3 days of August 2014, with the invitation of ITD World, the top personnel training and leadership company of Asia Pacific, Professor Dr. Rothwell will bring a short training program to the Vietnamese managers in order for them to get access to models and advanced instruments which are commonly used around the world in the field of talent engagement and retention. The special point of the program is that the participants will get a certificate approved and distributed by the Pennsylvania University, one of the top universities of the United States. The conference is also a chance for human resources, general directors, CEOs, enterprises owners and managers to exchange and share their experiences.
As we know, at the end of August, you will hold a speech on talent engagement and retention. So what are the reasons that have made you decided to accept the offer and come here in the personnel training program this time?
Well, I think there are two big issues in the HR world today. In Western countries, I think the biggest problem is engagement, getting workers committed to the work. And in Asia Pacific, I think the big problem in this region is retention. The opposite of that, of course, being high turnover, which I hear many managers and HR people complaining about.
So could you tell us a few key points of talent engagement and retention in this program?
Right. Well, I will be talking about the day-to-day, the tactical side of how we can move beyond just the HR department being the one held responsible for engagement and retention, and start to talk about the day-to-day role of leaders, that is, managers, senior executives, and other people in organizations. What role should they play in engaging and retaining their workforces?
When a good one walks away, people often blame the HR department first. What do you think about it?
I think that's a problem, and of course I was an HR person for 20 years before I became a professor, And I think part of that stems from the fact that in exit interviews that we usually give employees during their last day or their last week, we often ask them, why are you leaving? And they tell us a better paying job. Unfortunately, that gives managers the impression that the HR department is not keeping the pay rates competitive. But in reality, there's really a different problem going on, which is, why did people start looking for another job in the first place? And that often has to do with the way they are treated by their managers.
So before starting your program here in Vietnam, have you spent some time studying about the current state of managing and nurturing human resources here in Vietnam?
Absolutely. And what I believe is, based on what I've heard from many training sessions with general managers as well as HR people, is continuing complaints about the level of turnover in Vietnam specifically, higher than China, higher by far than the US or other parts of the world. So I think it's a real issue in Vietnam.
So how do you assess it? What advantages do we have and what shortcomings should we be improving and working on?
Well, I think advantages you have is the luxury of a rapidly growing economy, which has the advantage of giving people many opportunities for employment and advancement, and that's a positive. One of the challenges I see is that leadership styles have not kept pace with the times. You know, in the old days, maybe 20 years ago, when managers were first working in Vietnamese companies, they learned a very authoritarian approach to managing their workers. That style is no longer appropriate with the younger generation of workers in Vietnam or in any country.
It has been written in 2012 ASEAN Turnover Agreement signed by the member nations that the members have to facilitate turnovers and head to the liberalization of skilled workforce in ASEAN. Mr. Phạm Bình Minh, Minister of Foreign Affairs, revealed, in the human resources field, the knowledge of skills and ability will facilitate the turnover in the ASEAN community. It means that in a community of 60 million people, individual workers with high efficiency can freely choose to work in any nation they want. They will be architects, accountants, doctors, musicians, etc. With nearly zero paperwork procedures, there are high chances that many senior workers with experiences and specialities will come looking for big enterprises and add to the high-quality workforce that Vietnam is still in need.
So in the process of establishing economic community, Asian Economic Community 2015, the members will have to make commitments of free labor rotation. So what do you think of the opportunities as well as challenges that will bring to Vietnam?
Well, I think for the individual worker, the opportunities are great to move from lower wage countries in ASEAN to higher wage countries in ASEAN. But I think there's more to it than wages alone. People are also looking at things like the living standards, the cost of housing, the very many things enter a worker's mind when they're thinking about their future. And certainly wages is part of it, but they also think, how much will I be taxed on what I earn? And what kind of living standards will I have in the country where I choose to live? So ASEAN will mean that it's not just companies that are competing, nations will be competing for superstar talent, the most productive, the most innovative people.
So, what should incorporation and HR managers in Vietnam have to do to attract talents and keep a hold of their efficient workloads?
I've actually done quite a lot of research around the topic of retention, and that stems from my many trips to Asia. As I mentioned, I've been to Vietnam, but I've been to every Asian country multiple times, and then to China 73 times since 1996. And what I believe about retention, I published an instrument called 100 Best Practices in Employee Retention, and it allows the company to rate themselves against global research-based standards on what to do to reduce turnover of talented workers. And the average company scores about 20% on that instrument. They tend to think, managers tend to think that if we just paid workers more money, that's all that would be needed to keep them. And my research and a lot of the research on retention shows that that's false thinking. That pay is important, but it's not the only thing. It's how we treat workers that is critical. The leadership style of the manager being a very important factor. Also, the talent of the coworkers that you have to work with and the people you depend on. So when we look at HR, we have to think of the entire span of the company's relationship with the worker. What I mean by that is you can recruit for retention, you can select for retention, you can onboard and orient workers for retention. You can train workers, and training is actually a retention strategy. Managers usually don't think so, but it is. We can use performance appraisal as a retention strategy. So my point here is that every element of the HR spectrum, everywhere where a company touches a worker, is an opportunity to improve retention. And very few companies think of it in that comprehensive of a way.
A joint labor market among the Asian countries will be established. Then the Vietnam workforce will not only have to compete domestically, but also in an Asian scope. So what does the young Vietnamese workforce have to equip themselves with to raise their competitiveness?
You might think that I would say technology, because today that is such a popular thing. And we like to believe that the younger the worker, the more technologically adept they happen to be. But I wouldn't say that. What I am hearing as a complaint around the world, not just in Vietnam, but here too, is that younger workers just don't have good interpersonal skills. In other words, they can work great on a computer in a virtual environment, but sometimes working face-to-face is a problem, and that is a skill set that I think younger workers, in fact all workers, should improve.
Yes, that's a very important problem right now. Thank you for joining us today and sharing Vietnam.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing many of your viewers at my session in Vietnam in August.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that the discussion with Professor Dr. William J. Rothwell will help the Vietnam enterprises and HR managers in finding out the best strategy in managing human resources and talent retention in the process of Asian Economic Community 2015 establishment. Sharing Vietnam will stop here for today. Any comments and feedback, please email us at sharingvietnam@vtc.vn. Thank you for watching and see you again.